And good evening, I'm Morgan Chesky in for Tom Llamas tonight. Tropical Storm Ernesto rapidly strengthening as the storm barrels towards the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. The National Hurricane Center expecting Ernesto to intensify into a hurricane. Take a look at the latest path of this current system. The storm battering the Caribbean islands and pushing into the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico before reaching Bermuda by the end of this week. The tropical storm already leaving its mark. In Guadalupe, powerful winds lashing at the island, whipping palm trees. And in St. Kitts, strong gusts toppling this tree. You can see it even smashed several cars. Winds picking up speed in Puerto Rico. The island bracing for torrential rains, flash flooding, and widespread power outages. The governor urging people to stay home as conditions are only expected to worsen. A Center for Endangered Birds transferring the animals to a hurricane room to ensure their safety. Many communities quickly working to prepare for Ernesto. This is now the fifth named storm of the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season, coming right on the heels of Hurricane Debbie. And officials are revising this year's Atlantic hurricane outlook, warning it will be an extremely active few months. They're even calling for 17 to 24 named storms. 4 to 7 of those named storms expected to reach major hurricane strength. That means a Category 3 or higher. NBC meteorologist Angie Lastman joins us now. So, Angie, time this one out for us here. What is the latest on Tropical Storm Ernesto's current track?
All right, Morgan, here's the deal. We're going to see this system continue its general motion to the northwest over the next 12 hours or so. That's when we're going to start to see things deteriorating, specifically into the evening hours tonight and overnight for places like the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Right now, winds at 60 miles per hour. The system is fairly healthy, even though it was battling a little bit of dry air, but it will continue to bring the heavy rain as well as the potential for hurricane force winds to specifically the Virgin Islands up next, and then eventually Puerto Rico. The center of it will pass near or over the Virgin Islands, and then as we get into later parts of tomorrow, it'll be north, at least the center of the will be north of Puerto Rico. Now, those winds and the rain will extend far out from the center, more than 100 miles, so we'll see the conditions impacted like that. But notice it does become a Category 1 hurricane by the time we get into Wednesday. It'll spend some time over those warm Atlantic waters before taking aim at Bermuda down the line into the weekend as a Category 2 hurricane. Notice along the Atlantic coast, we will see some dangerous surf, some large rip currents. It'll be kind of a difficult couple of days out at the beach for folks that are planning to make it to the coast. But Puerto Rico specifically, that's where we're most concerned for the heavy, substantial tropical rain. We're talking 4 to 6 inches of rain widespread, but up to 10 inches will be possible in isolated spots, especially the northern portion of the island. This is really concerning officials when it comes to mudslides, landslides, and flash flooding, Morgan.
Yeah, concerning, no doubt. Angie Lastman, thank you so much. Next tonight, to our other major story, the race for the White House and the Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz doing his first solo campaign appearance today, defending his military service after attacks by Republican opponents. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell with the latest tonight.
Going solo for the first time as Kamala Harris's running mate before public service union workers. Today, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz making his first public response to attacks from the Trump campaign about how Walz talked about his time in the National Guard.
I'm going to say it again as clearly as I can. I am damn proud of my service to this country.
At issue, this 2018 clip posted by the Harris campaign, where then Congressman Walz, who was talking about gun restrictions, said he carried weapons in war.
And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
But Walz was never in combat. Trump running mate and Marine veteran J.D. Vance called that Walz description scandalous behavior.
I'm not criticizing Tim Walz's service. I'm criticizing the fact that he lied about his service for political gain.
The Harris campaign said last Friday Walz misspoke when he said he carried weapons in war. Walz served 24 years in the National Guard. Today, Walz did not address any specifics, but criticized the criticism.
And I firmly believe you should never denigrate another person's service record. To anyone brave enough to put on that uniform for our great country, including my opponent, I just have a few simple words. Thank you for your service and sacrifice.
And Kelly joins us now from the White House. Kelly, what more are we learning tonight about the ongoing FBI investigations into these separate hacks that targeted both the Trump and the Biden-Harris campaigns?
Well, Morgan, we've learned that the FBI is looking into this, and today the Harris campaign said that it has been notified that this is unfolding, but they don't think that there has been a breach. They're not aware of one, but they were told by the FBI last month that they believe this was a foreign operation. Now, separately, the Trump campaign has said publicly that they believe Iran is behind the attempts at hacking. Morgan?
And Kelly, I want to turn now to former President Trump and his conversation on X last night with Elon Musk. There was a lot that he said, including criticizing Vice President Harris's record. Let's listen into some of that.
She wants to have open borders, and now she's going like she's tough on the border. It's such a lie.
Yeah, this is simply not true.
What is the Harris campaign saying in response tonight?
Well, you're right that there was a lot. There were many topics, and it went on for quite a long time. But the Harris campaign responded by saying that these are two unhinged men, both super rich, who would trade on that at the expense of middle-class workers and Americans. And so it's a response to just highlight that Musk, who, of course, is the world's richest man and owns the platform that he used, is a Trump supporter. So it was a conversation between the candidate and a supporter. And it, of course, went after Harris and the campaign that is a new campaign that clearly Donald Trump is still adjusting to, the move from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. Morgan?
Clearly. Kelly O'Donnell, thank you so much. And for more on the race for the White House and the state of these ongoing political campaigns, I want to bring in Matt Gorman, Republican strategist, Megan Hayes, former director of the messaging in the White House and special assistant to President Biden. Thank you both for joining us. Matt, we know that Walz is now trying to defend his comments and clean up some of the controversies surrounding his military service. How big of an issue can this become if the Trump-Vance campaign continues to attack it the way in which they are?
Really, that's a question for the Harris campaign, because candidly, they let it get to this point. After, a week or so of silence, I can't believe it's only really been a week since he's been the VP, but they let it metastasize. And so eventually, if they don't address it, it grows and grows and grows. And whether it's him retiring as a command sergeant major when he really wasn't, or what that discrepancy was, as you saw the clip earlier, weapons in war. When you don't address an attack, or when you don't address a mistake, let it linger, it becomes a bigger problem.
No doubt. Megan, to you now. Walz is also attacking Trump and Vance on their union record and involvement with Project 2025. How effective do you think these arguments are going to be with voters going forward?
Look, I think that the Trump campaign gave the Democrats a gift last night with the Twitter interview or the X interview, excuse me, with Elon Musk. But I think that, the Democrats have built their party, or their party on the middle class and on unions, and I think that those policies are going to move forward. I do think that it's problematic for the Republicans to have this lawsuit out there, to have some other of these economic policies out there that affect the middle class. These are voters who are in the Rust Belt, who are very important to the voting bloc to win the election. So I do think that the Republicans have an uphill battle here in shoring up this base.
Understood. Megan, the DNC announced that they will also be streaming the convention on vertical platforms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. You worked for President Biden. How much of a contrast is this to what you experienced?
I think that the president was moving much more into social media and doing much more with influencers and doing things out there that were playing to a younger audience. But it is a change. I think that the vice president and the governor are different people. They have a different vibe about them, and that happens to be really well received on social media platforms. So it is a change because they are very different people. But it is exciting to see, to be able to meet American people where they are and to reach more and more people than traditional news sources.
I want to go back to you now, Matt. Former President Trump touting to supporters that his interview with Elon Musk, quote, broke the internet. Even though there were obvious technical issues, his campaign's claiming that they did raise more than $1 million. Do you think, despite the glitches here, that this was effective?
Yeah, stepping back, look, what you've seen by the Trump campaign now is more of an earned media blitz. So you have this, you had the news conference last week, J.D. Vance going on 3 Sunday shows of the weekend. It's trying to contrast this accessibility, this ability to answer questions with the Harris campaign, which hasn't done so. So I think what you're going to probably see in the coming days is even more of that. Look, J.D. Vance has been unleashed. I think he was the best communicator during the VP search process. They're going to see more of him on the trail. And again, to contrast with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who haven't been out there.
Understood. Megan, we know that former President Trump spent a large part of that interview attacking President Biden. Is there any specific reason that he's targeting him and not his actual opponent here?
Yeah, because I think that he wishes that President Biden was still in the race, because I think that he is angry that he cannot run against the person who beat him in 2020. So I don't think that he has really come to terms with his new opponent. And I also don't think he knows how to hold a campaign against the vice president and Governor Walz. I think that he was really prepared to run against President Biden and had the age attacks and some other different things really ready to go against President Biden. And now that it's shifted, he doesn't know which way to go. And the attacks that he's putting forth aren't landing. So I think that, he's just going back to what he knows, and attacking President Biden is his comfort zone.
Yeah, tried and true, understood there. Matt, allies of President Trump, like former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Vivek Ramaswamy, Kellyanne Conway, they've all called for former President Trump to stop attacking Harris personally and go after her policy. Do you actually see that happening?
I mean, as you saw in your opening, he has started to. It's a question of a couple things. Can he stick with it? And how effective is it, right? And in terms of really going at the message. Because right, there's plenty of stuff there. Flip-flops aplenty. Just on today, Medicare for all. Yesterday was taxes on tips. And so the ability that he can portray her, like J.D. Vance says in the Sunday shows, as a political chameleon, a flip-flopper, that's the best and most effective line of attack. I think you should do exactly what Kevin McCarthy said.
Two experts breaking it down for all of us, and ever so eloquently. Thank you both for joining us tonight. I want to go now to the growing battle over abortion access this November. 7 states now adding ballot measures this election, putting the issue of abortion rights to their voters. As we're learning more about women denied legal abortion care in Texas after dangerous ectopic pregnancies and suffering devastating health consequences as a result. Laura Jarrett spoke with one of them.
A constitutional amendment in Missouri that would wipe out the state's near-total ban on abortion, now set to appear on the ballot this November, while abortion rights organizers in the swing state of Arizona shattered records with more than 500,000 signatures to get their proposed amendment added.
This initiative has made the ballot.
Tonight, Missouri and Arizona joining a growing list of states, all with similar ballot measures that would create a new right to abortion up to the point a fetus can survive at around 24 weeks, something opponents say goes too far. This ballot push, the byproduct of the Supreme Court overturning the right to an abortion, allowing each state to pass their own restrictions. Laws now under increasing scrutiny as new data emerges about what's been happening in hospitals. A new analysis of federal records by the AP showing more than 100 pregnant women in medical emergencies like ectopic pregnancies denied care in the ER since Roe was overturned. As doctors tell NBC News, they are navigating vague laws that don't account for medical nuances.
There's so much fear and confusion because an ectopic can have a heartbeat.
Kylie Thurman had an ectopic pregnancy where an embryo implants in a fallopian tube. She was initially denied an abortion in Texas, despite the law making an exception for such emergencies. Then it ruptured.
I want to have kids, and I wanted to keep my fallopian tube, but now it's gone. A piece of my womanhood was taken.
She, along with another patient in Texas, are now calling on the Biden administration to investigate.
I had to fight like hell to get my care, and I still didn't get it fast enough.
And Laura Jarrett joins us now from our top story studios in New York. Laura, I want to talk about these women in Texas who were injured after being refused legal care. I'm curious, what recourse do they have now?
Yeah, Morgan, their options are pretty limited. Remember, they do not have a constitutional right to an abortion because of the Supreme Court's decision just 2 years ago. Now, they have filed a request with the Biden administration to take a look at these hospitals because they were supposed to be provided an abortion even under Texas state law, but this could take months or years to resolve. Morgan.
And Laura, what is next for the legal fight for abortion and access, speaking more broadly in terms of Texas here?
Yeah, so this is really more of a, as you said, a broader fight between federal law, which says you have to give people emergency care, and these state-level bans like the ones we're seeing in Texas and elsewhere. That's a fight that the Supreme Court could resolve if it wanted to. It didn't do it last term when it came up in the context of an Idaho law, but we'll see whether the court is now going to be forced to take it up again in the context of this Texas issue, Morgan.
All right, we'll be watching. Laura Jarrett, thank you. Overseas now to the Middle East, where Iran is rejecting calls to stand down over threats of retaliation against Israel after the killings of leaders from Hamas and Hezbollah. It comes after a series of deadly strikes by Israel inside Gaza, leaving dozens of people dead. For more on Iran's possible next moves, let's get right to Ellison Barber, who joins us live tonight from Tel Aviv. Ellison, what more is Iran saying tonight about their possible retaliatory attack? And regarding a potential strike, have Iran and its allies acknowledged this tension that appears to be building day by day here?
Yeah, you know, Iran for the last couple of days has consistently told, particularly those releasing statements from the West. He had a conversation with Britain as well as others. The new president of Iran did, saying that they consider retaliation for the death of Ismail Haniyeh to be a right. And they also say that they believe it is something that they have to do. They've been consistent in that really since this assassination, but there was a period of time where it sort of seemed like that rhetoric kind of slowed down. Then it came sort of back up, if you will, after there was that strike, the Israeli strike inside of Gaza on a school turned shelter. And since then, we have heard them again responding more directly to calls from the United States, Great Britain, other Western countries saying, hey, let's try and keep the temperature down, saying, one, we think it's our right and we have an obligation to respond because Haniyeh was killed inside of our territory, and also that they believe Israel, not them, is the one elevating tensions in the region. At the same time, we have heard in the last week, we heard from the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, and he talked about their possible plans for retribution, namely for the death of one of their top commanders on the outskirts of Beirut around the same time that Haniyeh was assassinated inside of Iran. And in a speech, it was about an hour and a half long, one thing that Nasrallah said was that they could make the decision to do something on their own with or without Iran. But when people were asking and talking about strikes that were happening over the northern border, whether or not that was the retaliation at the time, he said, one, it wasn't. And then he also said Israel will not know, and they do not know when we will respond. And the fact that they don't know, this back and forth of will it be tonight? Could it be tomorrow? How big will it be? Is it going to start on the northern border first or come from the east? He said all of that is part of the punishment, some sort of psychological warfare where people have to live in this constant state of unknown, but also fear of what could come. Morgan?
Constant fear, absolutely. And Ellison, I want to talk now about the war in Gaza as well. President Biden spoke about the possibility of a ceasefire. He sounded less optimistic than usual. We're going to play what he said.
I think you can still get to a ceasefire deal, or is that starting to be a distant possibility?
It's getting hard. We'll see what Iran does, and we'll see what happens if there's any attack. But I'm not giving up.
Not giving up, but we will see. We will see. And Ellison's is coming as Hamas says they're not participating in the next round of ceasefire talks. So how can you have these discussions if one of the parties to the war isn't even there?
I mean, that's the big question, right, Morgan? And it's one that reporters actually posed directly to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at a press conference yesterday. And he sort of skirted around answering that directly. They asked, will you still have these negotiations, these talks, if Hamas does not attend? And instead, what we heard Secretary Blinken do was reiterate his position, the United States position, that they think all parties should be involved in this. But look, our teams here, we have been talking to officials within Hamas's leadership body, particularly the political bureau, and they have consistently said they do not plan to attend these meetings. Just this morning, Dr. Bassam Nayyam, who is a political leader within Hamas, telling NBC News this, quote, the movement's position in the statement is clear, no need for any new rounds. They have been saying that pretty consistently, or at least hinting at it in some moments, if it's not as clear, that they didn't feel like they were going to be at the table since we saw the assassination of Haniyeh, when there was that strike on the school turned shelter inside of Gaza City this weekend. We heard again Hamas officials coming out and saying, we believe Israel is the one trying to turn this into a big regional dispute. And this, in addition to the assassinations we've seen, that to them says that Israel and Netanyahu are not serious about a ceasefire negotiation. Morgan?
Ellison, I know we're getting a harrowing new picture of some of the conditions on the ground there in Gaza. What more can you tell us about that and any upcoming ceasefire negotiations? One story in particular I know stood out to you.
Yeah, there was a strike. I mean, there are strikes, to be frank, every day, every evening inside of Gaza, but you often get glimpses of really specific human stories from our team inside of Gaza who has not left since all of this began. Gaza is their homes, and they continue to document what's happening inside of Gaza. I do want to show you one video. This is a baby. She's 5 months old, and what you're going to see is her aunt, some relative, walking her down the street and then later into the hospital. In the last week or so, her entire family, our team tells us, was killed in an Israeli airstrike. She has no members of her immediate family surviving anymore. An aunt had taken her to the hospital because she's just 5 months old. Her mother was breastfeeding. She was killed in an Israeli airstrike, they tell us. And since then, according to one of the doctors who spoke to our team, they've been having a really difficult time getting that baby to switch to formula. They say she spent the last 24 hours or so staying up at night crying, and she won't eat. And she is now one of the only members of her larger extended family. We're told 13 of her family members in all were killed in an Israeli airstrike, but her immediate family, her mom, her dad, her siblings, all of them gone. And that baby, just 5 months old. Morgan.
Ellison Barber bringing us the very latest from the front lines. As chilling as it is, Ellison, thank you so much. We appreciate you being there. Back here at home to a horrifying scene on a Texas highway. A Jeep rolling over multiple times after a two-car crash. Two toddlers flew out of that car and that was left stranded on a major roadway. But they're doing okay tonight. We do know their father might be facing charges, and Shaquille Brewster explains the latest.
A race to save two toddlers on a Texas highway.
Units aroused for that major accident off of East Freeway.
Shocking video showing the children wearing nothing but diapers stranded in the middle of the roadway after police say they were ejected from a Jeep. Two unidentified people running to get them out of harm's way. The crash taking place on Interstate 10 in Houston.
The cause of the accident between the two vehicles is still under investigation right now. The investigation has proven that the two children were not in car seats at all when that vehicle, the Jeep Wrangler, began to roll, and both toddlers were ejected out, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old.
According to the sheriff, the two children and their father, who was driving, were transported to the hospital in serious condition, but are expected to survive. The driver of the other car was not hurt. That father could face criminal charges.
They were toddlers, 4 and 1-year-old, and it is against state law to not have anyone under that age not in a car seat of some type. And evidently, from what we have, they were just sitting in the back of the vehicle, not strapped into anything.
Shaquille Brewster, NBC News.
Still ahead tonight, the trial of a woman accused of fatally shooting her neighbor is now underway. The Florida woman in court, her attorneys claiming she killed the black mother of 4 in self-defense. You'll hear the startling 911 call played for jurors. And the WNBA star filing a lawsuit against the league. The discrimination and retaliation Derica Hamby says she faced while pregnant. Plus, Utah's famous double R truck comes crashing down. What caused the iconic site to collapse? Stay with us. Now to an update on a case we've been following here on Top Story. A Florida woman accused of shooting and killing her neighbor is now standing trial on manslaughter charges. Jurors will have to decide whether the 60-year-old was acting in self-defense when she shot A.J. Owens, a black mother of 4. NBC's Kathy Park with that story tonight.
Tonight, a manslaughter trial now underway for Susan Lorenz, accused of shooting and killing her neighbor A.J. Owens. Sheriff's deputies say Lorenz opened fire when Owens came to her door to confront her about a dispute over an iPad and Owens' children.
The question in this case is whether the defendant was justified in doing this.
It was a breaking point in a long-standing neighborhood feud between the two, according to deputies, who say they were called to the area at least 6 times in the year and a half before the deadly confrontation.
She made an allegation that a woman came to her door and had threatened her.
Okay. And did she also complain about kids as well?
Yes, she had complained about children playing in the open field next to her apartment.
In opening statements, the defense calling Owens' death a tragedy, but claiming Lorenz acted in self-defense.
Susan Lawrence felt she had no choice at all,
but to fire that door. It was either Susan or AJ.
Prosecutors casting doubt.
You're going to hear the defendant say that she feared for her life. Now she shot because she thought it was either going to be her or it was going to be us. But yet you're also going to hear the defendant say that she never even intended to hit Ejected when she shot.
In this 911 call, you can hear Lorenz describing her fear at the time.
The woman was screaming and yelling and she was trying to break down my door and she was...
Okay, it was a female?
Yes. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed my gun and I shot at the door. And I thought she was going to kill me.
Lorenz, who has pleaded not guilty to manslaughter, later admitting in a 2-hour interrogation last June.
Was your goal to shoot and kill her?
No.
What was your goal?
To shoot and hopefully, she'd hear the shot and dissipate.
But you took aim at the door, is that right?
Yes.
Among the witnesses today, neighbors who say Lorenz had a history of yelling at children in their neighborhood. One witness saying he heard Owens angry at the door, but not threatening Lorenz's life.
So you said you heard come outside, you heard the B word. At any time, did you ever hear Isaac and Izzy's mom say, "I'm going to kill you"?
No, sir.
2 of Owens's children who witnessed their mother's death expected to take the stand later this week, according to their grandmother.
They're children, so how can they be prepared to take the stand to testify after witnessing their mother gunned down in front of them?
Imagine if this was your child and your grandchildren. I mean, this was her daughter who was killed in just the most senseless manner.
Kathy Park, NBC News.
And we are back with top stories in newsfeed, and we begin with an urgent search for an escaped murderer in North Carolina. Authorities say Ramon Alston escaped custody this morning during a transfer to a hospital in Hillsborough. According to police, he freed himself from leg restraints, then ran into nearby woods while still handcuffed. Alston was convicted for the murder of a 1-year-old in 2015. A $25,000 reward is being offered for information leading to his arrest. Here in L.A., protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza blocked a major highway. Take a look. We have some video just in tonight showing traffic completely stopped as a group of protesters sat along the southbound 405 freeway during the morning commute. The demonstration backed up traffic for miles. California Highway Patrol arrested several people. Utah's popular double arch rock formation has collapsed. The National Park Service releasing before and after photos. The agency says changing water levels and erosion likely contributed to this. The formation, also known as the hole in the roof or toilet bowl, consisted of Navajo sandstone, and it was believed to be 190 million years old. No one, fortunately, was hurt in that collapse. And tonight, NASA revealing that Mars might be hiding, get this, a secret ocean, believe it or not. A new study using seismic data found a reservoir of liquid water 7 to 12 miles below Mars' surface, which could hold enough water to supply an ocean as big as the planet. Now, according to researchers, the water, which is trapped within rock fragments, might even be able to sustain microbial life. That's right, alien life might be closer than we think. And staying up in space now, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is keeping a very close eye on the sun after intense solar flares began over the weekend. That geomagnetic storm alert cautioning electricity providers and satellite operators that technology on Earth could definitely be impacted. For more on these solar storms, Dr. Paul Sutter joins me now. He is a theoretical cosmologist and even an advisor to NASA. Doc Sutter, thanks so much for being with us. First, I do want to start off with these geomagnetic storms. I know they're triggered by recent solar flares, but they're proving to be even more intense than predicted. So, as best as you can for us non-scientists, what's going on here?
Yes, these solar storms happen naturally. It's a natural process on the sun as a byproduct of its enormous magnetic fields. And the sun goes through a cycle of 11 years of stronger storms and then weaker activity. And we are at the peak of one of these cycles. So we are seeing a lot of activity. We are seeing a lot of sunspots. We are seeing a lot of storms, a lot of flares coming off the solar solar surface, and that means more storms reaching the Earth and impacting us.
Speaking of us down here on Earth, what is the effect that actually happens technology-wise as a result of these storms?
Yes, in the most powerful kinds of storms, they can push through our magnetic field, push through the Earth's atmosphere, and have a storm of electricity and magnetism here on the Earth. And the biggest effect we can see is disruption of electrical power grids, where we have long, 1,000-mile long electrical wires, and this can disrupt the flow of electricity. It can blow up substations and transformers. This happens only in the most powerful of storms. The storm we are experiencing right now is not that powerful, so it's more an opportunity to enjoy the event, because we also get to see the effects of all this electricity and magnetism slamming through our atmosphere and creating some beautiful aurora.
Oh, okay. Good to know. I do want to circle back to that. But regarding the potential impact here, Doc, I know you're talking about the power grids being potentially hurt as a result. What about satellites? They're above the surface here. To what extent can the storms knock some of those offline and have a trickle-down impact for us here?
Absolutely. Satellites in space are much more vulnerable to these kinds of storms than electronics here on the surface of the Earth, which is why we have an entire network of solar weather monitoring and solar weather forecasting to look for activity on the sun, warn in advance of storms so that we can shut down satellites to protect them. So in the case of storms like this, we might see some disruptions, for example, in satellite communication and in GPS signals, because we need to turn off those satellites to protect them.
Going back to your aurora point here, I know that us out here in L.A., a lot of light pollution could be tough to catch the aurora borealis, otherwise known as the northern lights. For people who do want to spot those, do the typical rules apply, or does this solar storm create some different situations?
Oh, yeah. So typically the aurora are only seen in Arctic regions like northern Canada, Alaska, Iceland, Scandinavia. But in a large storm like this, the aurora can push further south. In this particular storm that is washing over us right now, if you go out tonight and you live in more northerly regions of the United States, like any of the states that border Canada, and depending on the strength of the storm, maybe even southern New England, maybe New York City, the Midwest, go outside, get to a clear sky, look north, and if you're lucky, you'll see a faint glow on the horizon, and that is the product of this solar storm slamming into our atmosphere.
Any particular time, Doc, or just as soon as it gets dark?
As soon as it gets dark. The storm is going to last all night long. It will probably subside sometime during the day tomorrow. So anytime it gets dark, it's clear. We are dealing with a relatively full moon. We have a moon that's close to full, but that sets around midnight. So if you can just get out, get away from the lights, get to a clear sky, and if you don't see the aurora, at least you can enjoy a beautiful, clear, dark sky.
Ever the optimist, Dr. Paul Sutter, thanks so much for making time to join us on Top Story. Coming up, the startling explosion at one of the world's busiest ports. The cargo ship erupting, sending a fireball into the sky as debris rains down. What we're learning tonight about that blast. Stick around. And we're back now with Top Story's Global Watch, starting with a drone strike on Rohingya Muslims that are fleeing civil war violence in Myanmar. Activists say at least 200 people were killed, including women and children. Survivors are now saying that they were crossing into Bangladesh when several drone bombers were dropped. The militia and Myanmar's military blamed each other for the attack. Activists say the country's military has stepped up attacks on Rohingya in recent months. A massive cargo ship exploded at a busy port in China. Take a look at the surveillance video just in tonight. This is the moment the Taiwanese-owned ship erupted into a fireball, sending debris flying into the air and water. Now, miraculously, No deaths or injuries have been reported. Officials say the ship was carrying hazardous chemicals when it caught fire. Chinese state media said shockwaves were felt about a mile away from the port, south of Shanghai, and that port currently remains closed. And Brazilian soccer star Vinicius Jr. was reportedly offered more than $1 billion to play in Saudi Arabia. That's right. ESPN reporting the Saudi leagues are proposing a 5-year contract to the Real Madrid forward worth a cool $218 million per season. Sources are telling ESPN he's considering the deal, which also includes a 10-year contract to be an ambassador for Saudi Arabia's 2034 World Cup soccer team. Soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo, he signed with Saudis back in 2022. Now to money talks and the major change brewing at Starbucks. The coffee giant announcing plans to bring in a new CEO with extensive industry bona fides. The chain parting ways with Laxman Narasimhan, who became chief executive in March 2023 after taking over for Howard Schultz. The company saying they've been mulling this move for months now amid falling sales and outside pressure from investors. In his place, Starbucks is bringing in Brian Niccol, an accomplished restaurant executive who's been leading Chipotle since 2018 after spending 3 years as the head of Taco Bell. For more on this move by Starbucks and what it can mean for business, I want to bring in NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Brian, good evening. What more can you tell us about the issue Starbucks was having that led to this significant change of action?
Yeah, significant change, of course, but I want to point out this doesn't mean that guacamole is going to be put into your Starbucks drinks. Yes, certainly this is a big shakeup, but the big story behind what Starbucks is dealing with is, well, apparently mismanagement that the board felt they needed to handle by bringing in fresh blood. When we kind of zoom out and take a look at what's been happening at Starbucks, their sales have been having issues in the past few quarters, both stateside and also internationally. Stateside, where inflation is really biting wallets and people don't want to fork up $7 for a drink just because it has a substitute milk in it and a few pumps of flavor, if you will. And then in China, where we've seen a slowdown in their economy at large, that massive market for that company has been slowing down as well. That's the big reason why if Starbucks wants to stop the slide here, preserve their brand image, they're going to have to bring in fresh blood to take a new look at exactly how this company needs to be run, not just domestically, but nationwide. They felt Brian Niccol was the man for that job.
And speaking of Mr. Niccol, I know the name a lot of people still associate with Starbucks is Howard Schultz. So who is Niccol, and why does Starbucks think he's the man for this job here?
Yeah, well, he has had a lot of experience in consumer-facing restaurant businesses. When we think about, obviously, his pretty celebrated tenure at Chipotle, where the stock has been one of the best performers over his time at that company compared to many other Wall Street stocks, not just including restaurant businesses, but he also has extensive business experience from other brands as well, like, for example, Taco Bell, where he was prior to Chipotle. Now, I know a lot of people might be thinking, well, how does experience in Mexican chain restaurants translate over to a coffee business? Well, you have to remember that jumping from Taco Bell to Chipotle was already a challenge in trying to basically get out there a premium brand. That's where Chipotle was trying to position themselves over, say, the quesadillas that you could get at Taco Bell, and he successfully did that. Again, as underscored by the stock performance over his time at that company, they see, at least on Wall Street, the same view that he can bring that type of premium experience over to Starbucks, where I saw one Wall Street note earlier today, Morgan, saying that the only significant innovation that they've had was the pumpkin spice latte. That was many years ago. Can he bring something fresh to this like he brought with the queso to the Chipotle menu? That's something Wall Street is holding their breath for.
Quesadillas at Starbucks. I'm all about that, Brian. I mentioned earlier, outgoing CEO Laxman Narasimhan took over from Schultz at Starbucks. Have we actually heard from Schultz about this move?
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to Howard Schultz, obviously he has been the kind of integral name behind Starbucks' massive growth. Now, when it comes to what he said about the company, he has criticized this company over the past few quarters. And actually, there was a fairly lengthy LinkedIn post from just a few months ago where he said, quote, "At any company that misses badly," referring to earnings, "there must be contrition and renewed focus and discipline on the core." Here's the interesting wrinkle. He was the one that on an interim basis took over Starbucks, and then decided that Laxman Narasimhan was going to be the man for the job. Now, basically, the board is saying he wasn't the person for that job, and Brian Niccol is now being put in. So any sort of further commentary from here from Howard Schultz would be very interesting as to whether or not he's going to execute on that contrition and renewed focus and discipline that he was talking about. But again, a very important person and figurehead behind Starbucks' story that's going to remain part of this conversation.
No doubt. And Brian, real quickly, market reaction, yay or nay here?
Yeah, well, when it comes to the stock reaction, it has really soared. Starbucks stock up almost 25% in 1 day of trading, while Chipotle shareholders pretty bummed out that they're losing Brian Niccol. Shares down almost 8%, Morgan.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. And up next, the emotional homecoming for the iconic Jackie Robinson statue. The sculpture chopped at its ankles, now rebuilt and ready to go, back on display. The community stepping up to the plate to honor the baseball legend. Next. Finally tonight, it's a story that began with a brazen crime. A beloved statue of baseball icon Jackie Robinson destroyed in Wichita, Kansas earlier this year. But not long after, donations and support from all over the country, well, they started pouring in, all for a big homecoming that was months in the making.
They arrived in their game day best, players welcoming another back home.
We know that out of darkness comes light.
Which is why Renee Alexander brought twins AJ and Aisley back to their League 42 ballpark.
I said, hey, you guys want to go see the new statue being revealed? And they said, yeah, I went crazy.
It was January when the league's beloved Jackie Robinson statue was stolen. The crime even caught on surveillance video.
You see that surveillance video? Someone taking them away.
I was like, was it because of race? Was it because of hatred?
The man who confessed blamed drugs, and when sentenced to prison for theft and other crimes, apologized.
I'm sorry.
But the shock of the crime was soon replaced by another. Strangers nationwide pouring in nearly $200,000 worth of donations, more than enough to bring Jackie back home.
Over the last 6 months, an exact replica, crafted in Colorado, then carefully packed to finally return to Wichita for a homecoming fit for a Hall of Famer.
1, 2, 3, go!
A monumental moment where Robinson's legacy looms large.
When they pulled that off and I saw Jackie was back, yeah, it almost brought me to tears.
Since being founded barely 10 years ago, League 42, named in honor of Jackie, now hosts nearly 600 Little Leaguers, offering an affordable option for anyone who wants to play.
If it wasn't for League 42, a lot of the kids in this community probably wouldn't even be playing baseball.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Including Jason Dennis's own son, Jackson.
I like how they put Jackie Robinson there because he's my favorite player.
Really? Of all time? When you walk past that statue next season, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking I'm going to hit a home run.
Inspiration from a player and man. Proving barriers were made to be broken.
It warms my heart that everything could just come full circle and now the kids can go back to playing ball like they used to.
I think it gives this generation hope that they too can do anything if they put their mind to it.
Do absolutely anything. Believe it or not, the son of the man who committed this crime to the original statue, now expected to play in League 42 next season. League tells me welcoming that young player was the right thing to do. Thanks for watching Top Story. I'm Morgan Chesky in for Tom Llamas. Stay right here. More news is on the way.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.